Oh my gosh, that was fast. I was like just getting a little bit started, and there we go. So cool. And we're going to take a look at common mistakes with useEffect and React. And in this one, we're actually going to look at timers and also, yeah. So here's the code over here. There's the code over here. There you go. Hi. Yes, right there. Cool. That has essentially a timer spot in it. So what we're going to do is a common interview question that I give when I do interviewing. Hey, Fernando. Good to see you. So, all right, let me move that now that I'm off to the middle here. What I often ask folks to do when they're interviewing for a React position is I like to actually test them on React. You know, I think that's fair, right? Okay, let me get my mouse here. Okay, so the idea is I want you to create a timer component, and it tests a couple of things. So let's try this out. So I'm going to create a timer, and the idea is that you're going to, Ayush, good to see you, sir. We're going to have a counter in here, and then we're going to go in. Let's initialize that counter. If I can actually type correctly, set counter. Adele, good to see you. And this is going to be a number, and it's going to start off at 0. Okay, so basically the idea is, and let me go and bring in useState so that we know what we're doing. And let's finally actually use this timer. Like so. And new timer. So there we go. Let's take a look and see how that works. Yeah, okay. So now it's stuck at 0. So the idea is that every second we want to add a 1 to counter, and that you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all that. And there's a couple of things that it shows off, like can a person go and create a component? Do they understand how to use useState, which so far we do. And then we get into things like this. Yeah, no problem. You know, happy to help. And the next videos that I do will be in the bigger font size. So, okay. So folks also go, okay, well, I need a timer. So I'm going to do set interval, which is the way that you do that in JavaScript. And you give it a function. And then you say, you know, set counter to counter +1. And you do that every second. And away you go. Done. Bob's your uncle. Everything's great. Of course, what happens in this case is that we blow up the browser because we create a ton of timers. And, well, let's actually just show it. I might end up bringing down my browser or having to do that. I will. So let's do that. Let's create a timer ID and set it to 0. And then each time we do one of these, so each time we render the component, we're going to add 1 to this timer. And then we're going to do a console log and say timer ID is timer ID, and the count that we know, counter is like that. All right, so my browser is probably blowing up right now. So yeah, we're getting all these cool, it looks actually like it's working, but look, we've got now 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 timers, and React is getting all kinds of crazy. So that's not good. You're having problems with this now. An arrow function that when called always uses set state. And okay, so here we go. So, oh wait, okay, we don't want to do this again. So let me go and just leave it an empty screen. So one way to fix this is the way to fix this is to do useEffect. But I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different angle on this, and we'll see if we can understand closures a little bit better, because this is actually a question that's primarily around closures. So I'm going to bring in UseCallback, and I'm going to create a little button down here. Probably going to end up being really big, actually. And we'll call that tick. So when you click on the tick button, it's actually going to be as if the timer went off and generated a tick. And so what do we need? We need an on tick. And in order to get that, I'm going to use UseCallback. So I'm going to set on tick to a UseCallback. And then in here, I'm going to do my set counter to counter plus 1. And now we've seen from the different videos that we worked on so far, at least in this common mistakes one, that we definitely need a dependency array in here. We need some way to tell React, you need to recompute use callback based on something. So we need an array, and if you leave the array empty, what happens is that it only gets called once. So let me take a look at that and hit save there. And now we'll go over to Chrome localhost. Cool. Oh, that's not a big button. All right, whatever. Okay, and we hit tick, and that's interesting. So we hit tick, and it goes from 0 to 1. So is that actually working? Well, let's go and add some console logs and see what's happening. So first off, we'll say console log in here, and we'll say on tick, and then we'll also give it what we think is the counter currently. All right, so let's refresh. And if I hit tick here, it says on tick. Let me make this also big so you can see it. And get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Oh, nope, that's getting rid of too much there. I just want the console, guys. How about that? Okay, so I hit on tick, and now I get on tick, but the count seems stuck at 0. And here's the reason why. So use callback. It looks at this dependency array, and when it's different, it grabs the contents of this function and stores it off as a stored function that it then returns the next time around. So what that means is the first time that we go into this function and useState, or this counter, is set to 0, we grab the state of that counter, and that's this function is a closure, and so we're capturing the state of that counter. And then, so it's stuck at 0. And then when we do our set counter, we do 0 plus 1, and we get 1. So how do we fix this? Well, we do counter, like so. And we say that we're going to recompute this callback. We're going to make a new function every time counter changes. So let's hit save in there. And away we go. All right, so that's good, right? Now tick works. So let's say that we go and translate this into a useEffect, because we don't want to have the user do that. We want the interval to basically give us one of those ticks. So let's bring in useEffect. Same kind of idea here. I'm going to get rid of the time. Well, let's leave the timer IDs around, because they'll be helpful in understanding why this isn't going to work. And we'll put our code in there. And now we've learned that, well, okay, in order to get this to work, right, we need to do what onTick is doing. So we need to put counter in there, right? Okay, so let's hit save. And again, we get into all this issue where boom, 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 boom. We're getting all kinds of timers, and they will go parametrically explode here pretty soon. We'll have 4,000 timers by the time you know it. And all right, let's get out of there. So the reason is that we're basically recomputing useEffect each time, and that's creating the side effect of this useEffect is that it's creating another interval every single time. We're not doing that here. We're just going and putting one onto it. So these two things aren't equivalent. So let's get rid of this again, and let's ask ourselves, is there a different way to go and set counter such that I could retain my no dependency array there? Well, there's a different version. There's two ways to do set counter, and another way is to give it a function, and that you can give that current counter, and that'll tell you what the current counter is. And so we can go and actually make that a function in here. And we'll grab our console and drop it in there. And now anywhere where we were saying counter, we want to say current counter. Let's give that a try. All right, let's go and bring up localhost again. Cool. All right, let's bring up our inspector. It's not blowing up. That's a good thing. And there we go. So now that works too. And we have no dependency array in there. So that feels like a good way to get around this issue. So let's go and now bring back that useEffect. Not save it yet. Let's get rid of that counter. And then over here, where we, again, we were doing set counter with counter +1. We want to give it the current counter. Give it current counter +1. And there you go. So let's try that out. Okay, cool. Now, is it creating a lot of timers? We don't know. I mean, I guess I should go and bring back that console log in there. Drop that in there. Man, I love prettier. Prettier is so good. And then I'll change it to current counter and see what happens. Okay, looking great. Very, very cool. So now this, to me, actually, if I were to give you this interview test and you gave me, this code in here, I'd be like, yeah, okay, you got the job. But there are some issues with this. And one of them is the fact that we don't clean this up. So we do a set interval, and then we really should at some point do a clear interval to get rid of it, because you're essentially leaking a resource. Now, this might not make a difference on pages like, the home page of some company or whatever, like a splash page. But when you're doing like a single page application, this makes a big difference, because you're going to have one JavaScript virtual machine that's running constantly. And if you keep essentially leaking resources like this, eventually they're going to dry up. So, or they're going to do weird things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and force React to create another instance of timer on a button press. So let's go down here and create another button called new timer. On click is on create new timer. And so how do we force React to actually create a new instance of something? Well, what you can do is you can give it a different key. So I can give it a key like that. And anytime that key changes, React will build a new component for you automatically. So let's do that. Let's do index and set index and start those off at 0. And this is a kind of fun one. Not everybody knows that, but that is a way to get a fresh new object, is to just set its key to something else. And then let's do it on create new timer. Again, we'll use callback, and then we'll do set index to index +1. And we know that's not going to work unless we add index to our dependency array, right? So now we're showing off a little bit more React knowledge in our interview. Okay, so looking good. We got timer ID 1 here. Let's do new timer. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, and so we get timer ID 2. So we've created a new timer. We got some interesting little side effects here. So we get this thing where it says can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. So yeah, that's not good. So here's what happened. So we had our original timer, let's call it timer 1, right? And it had that useEffect, and it was running this set interval over here, and then we get rid of it. Well, that interval still went off. And so it set that counter on timer 1's instance, which is now gone. And so it's unmounted. And one way to fix this is to go and do something that you might see in a bunch of spots, particularly around things that do like service requests, stuff like that, where you say, okay, I'm going to track whether I'm mounted or not. So I know that if I go into this useEffect, I am mounted. And I know that if I leave this, if this cleanup function is called, I am not mounted. So that's pretty easy logic. And then I can go and wrap this set counter in a check for if I'm mounted or not. And this is a good idea. Not in this particular case, but this is a good idea. So if you've got like a component that's making a service request, you know, it's doing a fetch call or something like that, and you don't know how long that's going to take, and it's possible that this component might not be around by the time it comes back, then you're going to want to go and do this isMounted check. So let's try this out, and we'll refresh. So timer ID 1's looking good. We go and make a new timer, and now we're not getting that warning. We haven't blown anything up, which is a good thing. But we're still leaking that timer, which is not great. So what we need to do instead, in this case, is to just grab the output of setInterval, which is a handle to the timer, and then use the cleanup function to get rid of it. So let's see here. So I'm going to go, oops, const timer equals, and then down in my cleanup function, I'm going to do clear interval and then give it that timer. Okay, so there we go. Let's try this out. And now make a new timer. Beauteous, gorgeous. And we're no longer leaking that interval. So nice cleanup of everything in there. Okay. So that's one reason to use these cleanup functions. Another reason to use cleanup functions is when you're doing event listeners. So you're adding an event listener to a DOM element, and then you want to clean it up when you're done. So let's get rid of a bunch of this stuff that we don't need. Make this font size is so huge, we don't get all that much on the screen. All right, here we go. So let's trim this down a little bit. How's everybody doing, by the way? I've actually got kind of a stomach ache, but otherwise I'm doing pretty good. Is that what I want? Yeah, I'll keep the div, but there we go. Okay. Let's take a look here. All right, looks like our timer is running and everything's cool. Boy, our Chrome display is all kinds of messed up though. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to have a rollover thing. I want to be able to roll over and get like a pop-up that says what the timer is. So the first thing I want to do is say, if I roll over this item, then we're going to go and display another timer counter. So let's go and make a piece of state that says that. So display pop-up. Set display pop-up. You mean over in Chrome, Adele? Yes, probably so. Use state and give it a Boolean, since we're in TypeScript and we want to be good about such things. And it's going to start off at false. So we're not going to show the pop-up until we're rolled over. So let's go down here. And this is a nice little way in React to say that I only want to show stuff when that's true. And we'll say that that's the, oops, hold on. Got to put a tag in there, div. And we'll say new timer pop-up. Okay, let's see how we're doing. And also deal with Adele's issue here. So plus, woof, man. Oh my gosh. It's like I feel like I'm on a 640 by 40 display here. Whoa. Okay, so we're getting a nice big console log down there. We got our new thing, but we don't have this, so rollover item isn't actually doing its work. So we need to go and add some event listeners to that. Now, in all reality, I think I could just do on mouse over and have this handled for me. But, I want to do this as a reference and show you how to cleanly add and remove event listeners, because, sometimes you can't do that. So first I need to add a ref here, and we'll call that the popover or pop-up, popover, rollover. How about that? Rollover item ref. Sounds good. Awesome. Let's see. And I'm going to do use ref. And I'm just going to say it starts off in null. So first issue is I don't have use ref, so let's go and add that. And then I need to add HTML div element, which is what this is actually pointing to. So now we have our ref, and so we need to add some event listeners to it. So let's do that. UseEffect, and we know we want to do that when the component loads. And why does this actually work? So, well, hold on. Actually, let's put it in there. Console.log in the effect. And also, you know what? I'm going to add in that ref as well, just to kind of show it off. Because I want to talk also about the sequencing here. So before the effect, and then after the effect. And I want to show how these things get sequenced, because that's actually really important. All right. Ugh, my God. Look at all that. Oh, hold on. Actually, no. Sorry. Let's go back to VS Code. I'm just going to get rid of the timer for the moment. No reason to have that. We're done with timers. Okay. So here we go. So that's interesting. Before the effect, we already have an object, after the effect, and then in the effect. And the reason I wanted to put on these console logs is I want to show you how this actually takes place. So we create the item ref. It apparently has a value, which is cool. I don't know why. Maybe, okay. Oh, no, I know why. Okay, hold on. Current, that's why. Let's put in the current value in there. I always forget when it comes to refs that you want to use that current thing. Yes, perfect. Perfect. Here we go. Okay, so before the effect, it's null. After the effect, it's also null. But then when we get to inside the effect, we have that div element. So why does that actually happen that way? So here's what happens. So when React runs this component, it first creates a state, creates both these pieces of state. Cool, that's awesome. It creates this useRef down here, and the current value of that is null. It then does our little console log. And then when I do this useEffect, it doesn't actually run that useEffect right then. It kind of holds on to that useEffect. And then it does this console log. Then it does the creation of these nodes, and it synchronizes it with the VDOM. And then it runs that useEffect. And so at this point, right, we actually created that, we connected the current to this particular div element. So that's why it was null here, it's null here, but when you get into here, you've actually got that rollover item ref. So it's really important to know. Like, I think people also get confused about useEffect, and they think it just like gets run right there. It doesn't get run right there. It actually gets run later. So that's really important. And it's the reason why, in this case, we can just safely go and just add some event listeners, because we know that this is going to be set. So let's go and add some event listeners. And we'll say on mouse over. Is that right? Maybe, or just mouse over. There we go. And then we'll give it on mouse over, which we have to go create, and then, oops, hey now. I need to figure out what that key binding is, because I end up hitting that key binding all the time going to the bottom of the file. Mouse out. All right. And now we got to go and create these things. So I got to go and create on mouse over. I'll use callback for that. And in that one, I'm going to set the display popup to true, because we're over that display popup, that display element. And then on mouse out, we'll set it to false. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, and now this is telling me that I've got issues because I'm using these on mouse over and on mouse out, but I'm not actually putting those in my dependency array. Oh, I'm not using set counter anymore, but whatever, that's fine. So let's go and add those. All right, so let's try it out. Let's see if they actually work. Hey, look at that. So now every time I roll over this, that pop-up comes out, and that's really cool. Of course, we know from our experience with the timer, we've created this interval, we need to clear it. Well, we need to do the same thing here. And this actually comes up with an interesting problem as well. So we'll return a function, which is going to be our cleanup function. And we kind of assume that we can just go drop in there. And instead of saying add event listener, we just do remove event listener, right? Fair assumption. Effects run after the render. That still seems off to me. It runs after render, yeah. But you want the update? Yes, exactly. So, it runs after the render for sure, and then you can trigger an update by setting some state, and that the setting of the state will trigger a re-render. And again, that's why you run into these cases of kind of infinite loop. So if the component renders, you register that effect then changes the state, and then that reruns the component again, and you get it, so they get into those loops. So that's why when you have to make sure that your useEffect doesn't depend on the thing that it sets. And if it does depend on the thing that it sets, you got to be really careful to make sure that you're not just continuously in a loop setting that over and over and over again. But it is weird. I get you. You know, asynchronous stuff, man. It's why this pays the big bucks. Okay, so we're actually getting an error here. And again, set counter, that's about the timer. We're not going to deal with that. So but this is a kind of obscure one. So it's basically telling us the ref value of rollover item ref.current will likely have changed by the time this cleanup effect runs. So what that means is basically, well, let's say that we had a little logic here and there to like kind of maybe we have a different ref on a different, we have the same ref, but we use it in two different places or something like that. Because we have that weird effect of we set the ref and then we set the useEffect, it's possible that because we're using current and this value always remains the same, that we could add the event listener to one HTML component, and then when we get here, try and remove them from the new HTML component. And so what we need to do is capture the thing that we're actually adding them to. So we'll call that, ref. And we'll set it down here, actually. And then we'll use, well, in fact, we can just use const there. That's fine. And then we'll remove that from our cached version of the reference. So this is another way that we're using closures. We're just capturing the current value, the current thing that we're pointing to there, and then we're removing event listeners from that, as opposed from removing it from the new element that doesn't even have, well, would have the event listeners because we just added them. But this asynchronous stuff, it's crazy. Anyway, so if you get that weird error there, then that's what it's talking about. All right, let's try this one more time. And there we go. We have properly done kind of the two big gotchas when it comes to useEffects, and which are around timers and asynchronous work like that, or timeouts. So if you use set interval or set timeout, you're going to want to do it this way with the clear interval or clear timeout. And then with the callbacks or the event listeners, then you want to remove them by doing, but also you want to make sure that you're removing the right ones from the right spots. Alrighty. So I had a question last week that I don't think that I got to, and I want to get to it because it is actually kind of interesting, but I don't run into it all that often. So it's going to be a little bit of an exploration for us. So somebody asked me last week, they said, what happens if I want to copy a prop that's coming into my component, but then I can mutate it within the component itself? So how do I do that? How do I initialize that prop? So what would be a good way to do this? Okay, I'm going to create a new component. We'll call it a smart component here. So it's gonna take a value as an initial seed value. And it's going to be a number. All right. And let's see. So I'll just return a div that has the input number and then value. All right. Okay. So let's go and do that. Just tuned in. Won't ref be null when the component is mounted? Yes. Ref no. Well, okay. Let's go back here. For a few seconds. No, actually. Well, yes, for a few seconds. Not a few seconds. But it will be null. Yeah. So you just tuned in. You actually missed the fact that like the reference was null here at this point, and null here at this point, and null as you move in through here. But once React actually does the VDOM connection between the nodes that we create here and the actual DOM, then this ref is resolved and set. And after that, this useEffect runs. And so that's why rollover item ref current is actually set at that time. A few microseconds. Yeah, probably so. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go down here. We'll create a new smart component. We'll call it, we'll give it a value of 100, like that. Okay. There we go. Input number is 100. And so I think what the idea here is you have some sort of current value in here. Or we'll call it, you know what, we'll call it secondary value. So this is the primary value, and this one is the secondary value. This is sort of like our copy of it. And we'll start that off as a number with the value. Okay, so let's see, secondary value. So that's our input number over here. And then our secondary value is secondary value. And let's see what happens. Okay, so secondary value is also 100. So cool. That makes total sense to me. So value comes in here, it's 100. You go down here, it's there. Okay, so let's go make a button here that says update or increase primary value. Increase primary value. So that's just going to add 100 to that value. So let's say on click equals on increase. And so we need a value there. So we need to track some state here. Const value set value. Use state. We're going to start off at 100 again. Actually, you know what? Let's go with 1,000. Why not? And then we'll do, just grab this guy because we're lazy. On increase. And we're going to set the value of this to the value plus 1,000. So that's just, you know, it's going to go 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 like that. Okay. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. So as I click on this guy, then this value changes, which you'd expect. But this one, the secondary value, does not change. And that's, I guess, problematic in this point. All right. So why is that? Well, okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's do a useEffect, and we'll say at this point, if the value changes, then set the secondary value to the value, the incoming value. So what do we think that's going to do? Let's go try that out. All right. So now these two work in lockstep. Anytime I increase the primary value, then the secondary value gets set. Awesome. Now, can I go and make another button that's inside of our smart component that also messes with secondary value? And we'll see what happens there. Let me answer Skya's question here. Hi, if you're passing state setter to a child component, should you always wrap it in a use callback before passing it? Yes, absolutely. The reason The reason is referential integrity. And there's a great article by Ken C. Dobbs on this. If I can find it, I will put it in the comments. But if you look up for Ken C. Dobbs and UseCallback, useRef, useEffect, he's got an excellent article on when to use useCallback and useMemo. Actually, that's the one. It's about useCallback and useMemo, because there's a big debate in the community about whether to use them or not, because there is a very slight performance overhead for using them. But I think unless you know you don't have to, I would definitely err on the side of using useCallback and useMemo. Okay, so let's go make another button in here called bump secondary value. And that's going to just add 1 to our secondary value. So let's see, on click, on bump. And we'll have a use callback again. And in this case, we're going to look at secondary value, because we're going to set secondary value to secondary value plus 1. Oh, yeah, why not? Plus 10, whatever. Okay, cool. Hi, Sky. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So let's see. So let's bump the secondary value. Cool. So that's great. So what happens when you increase the primary value? Cool. Well, that makes total sense to me. And I think that's actually what the person wanted. But basically, so the idea here is if a new kind of override value comes in, then we kind of override our internal copy. But if we, in the meantime, we can just manage that local copy and mutate it all we want. Join late, don't want to bother Jack, but why are we using use callback to set state? It's a great point. Yeah, again, you could use, like, let's just take this one as an example, right? Okay, so this will work. 100% works every time. I used to do this all the time. This is totally classic code. But the reason I'm not doing this anymore is for 2 reasons. One, I'm creating a lot more custom hooks. And, well, it's really the one reason. I'm creating a lot more custom hooks, and I don't know what people are doing with the callback that I give them. And the reason that this is a problem is that every time this app gets re-rendered, and it gets re-rendered a lot, actually. Let me go and put in a console log here and say app rendered. And we'll go back over here, and you can see how many times this app is rendered. It's rendered quite a bit. Rendered, right? It renders every time I change any state. So this whole function gets rerun every time anything changes. The issue is that this on increase is actually a new function. It gets created every time. And so if you pass, and Sky had a really good question about this, which is why do you want to use callback? If you pass use on increase down to some subcomponents, then they'll get a different on increase every time, even though in reality, it might not need to change. And so if you've got a cascade of like a useEffect, it depends on some callback functions or something like that, then those might change, and they're not necessarily really semantically changing. That being said, so in this case, like, let's take this use callback down here. You got to make sure that you get your dependencies right. So if I go and I put an empty dependency array in here, and I actually spell use callback right, then when I do this increase primary value, which is the button that's associated with that, it'll go up once, but it won't ever go up again. And the reason being that this callback, this closure is only updated when this dependency array gets changed. And so in this case, right, we actually do want use increase to change every time, or we can use the variant here where you get the current value and you just add 1,000 to it. And in this case, onIncrease would never have to change. And once you give it to subcomponents, then they don't ever see any changes. Skia, by the way. Nice to meet you, Skia. I appreciate it. I appreciate the help on pronouncing your name. All right. It's a great name, by the way. That's a cool name. And let's try it out. Let's see if that works. All right. Well, I don't remember who asked me the question, but I hope I answered it 1 week later for you about like the whole like primary, secondary value and all that. So if let me look at like Rosinian one's question. So if some props and children are not changing, like a tree structure, are you passing the new object without a use callback? Still forced to re-render or not? Yes, right. So if other props are not changing, let's try that. Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to create some dumb component here, right? So some dumb component. All right, and it's going to take a callback. It's going to take an on click or something like that, but it's actually not going to do anything with it. It's just going to go div. I'm dumb like this. I'm not doing anything. Okay, let me make this syntactically right. And actually, I got to put in a console log in there because we actually want to see when it's changing, right? Okay. Eventually, I'll get the syntax right on this. Okay, no, that's not right either. Gosh, man, I'm a mess. Hold on. Yes, that's it. That's the one. Okay, cool. So console log. So some dumb component is rendering. Okay, and I'm going to go use some dumb component, and I'm going to use the onIncrease that is just a function, just like that, just like I used to a long time ago or recently or whatever. Some dumb component, but I'm going to pass it onClick, and that onClick is going to be onIncrease, like so. Oops. Fine. Whatever. Jeez. So touchy, TypeScript. How about that? You like that? Okay. Hey, cool. All right, let's take a look. So we got some dumb component rendering. And I'm going to go and increase my primary value. And now, yeah, some dumb component is re-rendering because onIncrease will have changed. Actually, I think it will anyway, but if you were to memoize some dumb component, you'd note that onIncrease was actually changing. It is a different function every time, and that's going to force your components, even though you think they shouldn't need to change because data isn't changing, the functions that you send back, or the functions that you send to them are changing, and the references are changing to them. So there you go. Wow, that is some deep cuts right there. Thank you so much for those questions. Like deep copy reference object. Don't know if I can explain my understanding. I'm with you. We are, as I say, we are into some deep waters on this one. Ramos. Nice. Thanks a lot, sir. Okay. So there we go. Hey, but some other things before we wrap this up. Oh, thank you. Let's, I did want to talk about the Discord channel. If we go over here to the interviews or interviewing section, got some really cool stuff. So these are interview questions that you get pretty much a couple of times a week. They're either on React or TypeScript. I think there's some folks over in the Vue channel doing some Vue ones. They're basically there to help you learn how to solve those tricky interview questions. As I showed in the beginning of this video, the one that I give is that timer question. So sorry about the Ramus, but I think your code's gonna be far better off for it. So they're really fun. And in particular, the one that I'm just about to put up over there is one on TypeScript, and it's about function overloading. So if you want to try out your hand on something fun, they usually take, no more than 20, 30 minutes to try out, and then you can go post your solution, and we all give you feedback on your solution. So really, really great. And if you want to kind of build up your confidence before you go into some of these coding interviews where they ask obscure, crazy questions, certainly happy to help with that. All right. Well, hope this is fun for y'all. I appreciate a nice, fun, small audience today. It was great. And we'll be back next week with some more fun videos, maybe a different format. So I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, thank you all for showing up. I hope you have a great weekend. Hope you get vaccinated and we can get back to some semblance of normal. And